What the fuck is Blood Bowl? Well, it's not that hard to explain. It's basically a bastardized version of American football, crossed with a bit of rugby, and crossed with a whole bunch of Games Workshop's Warhammer Fantasy, and blood, gore, and a bit of general mayhem. The object of Blood Bowl is to outscore your opponent, and you have about two periods of time to do this, each period being 8 rounds. 8 rounds for you and 8 rounds for your opponent. See, Blood Bowl is a turn-based game, which might sound strange, but that is kind of the magic of the game. There's a whole bunch of strategy involved in Blood Bowl. Most of it is to try and minimize your dice rolling and hoping you can punch the shit out of whoever you're playing against. What I find so enjoyable about Blood Bowl is that your players actually get better over time. The more games you play with them, if they survive, the better they get. If they do some actual passing, or perhaps score a goal, or even intercept a pass, or hopefully kill a dude or at least maim him, they get star player points, which after a certain amount of points they can upgrade to a higher level and get another skill. Skills I will cover later, but rest assured they are pretty awesome and you want to get as many as possible. Let's take a look at the game, shall we? I'll be playing the PC version of Cyanide's Blood Bowl game. There are a few different Blood Bowl games. There's the original board game and a whole bunch of different versions. You tend to want to play the latest version because the rules do update from time to time. It's in 3D and it's very fancy, so you do get to see people get punched and hurt and stuff like that. It's also a bit clunky, but I think we'll have to suffer through it because the only other version is a Java version, which is good, but it's only good for people that actually know how to play the game and enjoy it. It's not very pretty to look at. Actually, some might even consider it ugly. But anyway, here's Cyanide's version of the game, which is what we'll be playing. And let's take a quick look at the teams before we do anything else, because they are about the most important thing you could do in Blood Bowl. So, here we are in Blood Bowl, the game, the PC game. I thought we'd start in here. This is the team viewer. And have a quick look at the different races, because it's one of the funner parts of Blood Bowl. You can play, in this version of the game, you can play a few different races, and they all have their own strengths and weaknesses. So depending on what type of game you like to play, if you're, for example, someone that likes to just beat your opponent into a pulp, you might want to play with the orcs. They look kind of like this. Or if you're more into quick gameplay and just try to outrun your opponents, you probably want to play something like Skaven, which, well, they run quick as heck, but they can't take much damage. But let's go over them from the top, shall we? This is what the humans look like, surprisingly. As you can see here, there are different player types. In a Blood Bowl team, you have at most 16 players, and preferably you want to start with 11, because 11 is all you can field on the pitch at any one time. You can only put on new players after halftime or whenever a touchdown is scored. And depending on the position of a player, you can have a different amount of them. Like, the humans have catchers, which are good at catching the ball if someone decides to pass to him, and you can only have 4 of them. And this is a thrower, and he's good at throwing the ball because he has passing skills. You can only have a few of those. So depending on what type of team you want to play, team makeup, you can play a totally different team. Like the Blitzers here are, well, they're good at punching other dudes and making them hurt. The humans in Blood Bowl are pretty much like Mario in Super Mario Bros. 2. They are not great at anything, but they're not awful at anything either. They do have a decent passing game, they can take a bit of a beating, and they can outrun some dudes. they're fun but a bit boring to play. Actually, no, that's not true. They're not boring to play. They're average. They don't have much flair. But the dwarves, on the other hand, I personally find really boring to play because they're slow. So what they tend to do is pick up the ball and then move slowly down the field and hopefully score before the halftime or the match is over. And they're really hard to knock out. And that's the dwarves. They do have different colored beards, which is nice, I guess. Skaven, we covered a bit earlier. They are, well, they're rats, and they're kind of quick, and some of them can take a punch. Most of them will bite the dust if you even look at them. Actually, no, but, well. What's fun about Skaven is that they can take mutations, which means they can get extra abilities that most of the other teams can't. They can get extra arms, or they can, well, smell bad. Stuff like that. Orcs, oh, I'm sorry. I don't wanna pick a color. Fine, I'll pick green. There we go. Let's see if we can get someone that doesn't look awful. Okay, this is apparently the Hulk. The Orcs are a bashing team, which means they like to, instead of outscoring the other team, they just like to beat them to a pulp and hope that there aren't enough players left to actually be any opposition at the end of the game. These are the black orcs. They're extra strong and punch extra hard, and they're all bitches. Lizardmen, they're a strange bunch because of the skinks right here. They run really fast but can't take a beating, and then we have the sauruses, which can't really hold on to the ball and dodge around, but they can hit really, really hard, which means you run around with vulnerable players that are really fast, and these big guys try to protect them while they score. Goblins, they just tend to cheat a lot, and they have illegal weapons like pogo sticks and stuff like that. They're fun to play 1 or 2 games, but I don't really like playing too many games with them. I just find they're not my type of team. Wood elves are faggy as hell and elfy, which means they're graceful and elegant and do a mean passing game. They have a high agility, so they can jump around and pass around and dodge around and run the fuck away from you. The big downside to the wood elves and elf teams in general is that they're really expensive to buy, and you don't have that much money, so if someone gets hurt, you're kind of screwed. Chaos teams. The chaos. They also like to punch a lot. They're kind of like the orcs, only they can take mutations, and they're better at almost everything, but they're also more expensive, and yeah, they're chaos. There's not that much to say about them. Dark Elves, on the other hand, is one of my favorite teams because they're not super bashy, they're not built to be bashy, but it's just that they can give out a beating from time to time, and they're really good at handling the ball. And also they have Witch Elves, which in this version of the game look super slutty for some reason. No, I don't want to pick up. Damn it. I want to fuck. I want to change the skin. Yeah, so, and those are the races in Cyanide's Blood Bowl. I thought we'd take a quick and more in-depth look at what a player in Blood Bowl looks like. So here's the buy screen for the human team. As you can see, I've got 5 different player types to choose from, and over here they cost a certain amount of money to buy. Now remember, on a team we can have a maximum of 16 players, and not that many teams start out with 16 players. Most teams, when you buy a new team, when you're just starting out and don't have that much money, you're usually only going to come up to 11 or 12 players, depending on what type of team you're running and what type of game you want to play. you need to buy at least 11 players when you start out, so you can't just buy like an ogre and 4 blitzers, since they're the most expensive here, and then hope that that will work out, because trust me, it won't, and also it's not allowed in the rules. So let's have a look here at our lineman. And now these guys have names here, but we don't care about that because they mean nothing. All that matters is what position they're in. Now, this is a lineman. This is a human lineman, which is about the most average of player types you can actually get. They're also the meat of the human team. You're going to have a lot of these guys. They're not good at anything, but then again, they don't cost that much, so if they get punched out, it's not that big a deal. Now, every player type in Blood Bowl have 4 different stats, and these are pretty important to determine how good a player actually is. Every lineman has the same stats, so you can't draft in extra cool players by luck or anything. If you buy a lineman, he's going to look like this when you buy him. This first one here, MA, stands for movement, and that means he can move 6 squares every round. And that's the most he can move. There is an exception to this rule, but we'll get to that later. He can move 6 spaces. That's not a whole lot, but there are many that move a lot slower than that. Like the dwarf team, for example, where most of the players move only 4. And since there's a set number of squares up to the touchdown zone from the middle of the pitch, you can imagine that if you're a slow team, you're not going to get to score as often because you can't move as far. The second here stands for strength. Strength is only really important when comparing it to whoever you want to punch or whoever is about to punch you. If you're stronger than him, you're going to have an advantage. If he's stronger than you, he's going to have an advantage. If you have the same strength, it's mostly a toss-up. Actually, the attacking player always has an advantage, but you generally want to punch dudes that are weaker than you because this is a pretty mean game. Agility stands for how good you're at stuff like picking up the ball, handling the ball, basically anything that has to do with the ball other than moving with it. And also dodging away from players. If you're standing next to an opposing player and you want to run away, you need to roll a die and hope and pray that you roll high enough. The last one right here is armor. Actually, it's armor value. And that's just 8 is a pretty, well, it's the average number again. What happens when you do get punched? Your opponent rolls 2 d6 dice, so 2 dice with 6 sides, like a regular old die. And if he rolls higher than your armor value, you're about to get really hurt, because then he gets thrown on the casualty table, and you don't really want that. So a high armor value is good. And as we can see here, a lineman also has access to some skill categories, which is useful when he levels up, when he gets enough experience points to actually gain a skill that's useful. So if he can easily get general skills, he can't as easily get agility, passing, and strength skills, which usually they do have better skills for the most part. Some of the most powerful ones are in general, but if you want to specialize a player, you want to get into these other categories as well. And he can't take mutations because he's human. And so on. I'm not going to go through all the races like this. I just wanted to go over the different stats a player has, so you can make a more informed choice when you force me to play some retarded team. Okay, and we're finally in the game. I've set up a hot seat game, so I'm going to control both of the teams just to explain a few things. And the first thing that happens is one of the teams has to choose heads or tails. So let's choose tails here. Apparently the other team won, which means they get to choose if they want to kick the ball or if they want to receive the ball. The receiver is the team that gets to try and score first. In the second half, the team that received in the first half kicks. There's some strategy involved here, but since this doesn't really matter at this point, I'm just going to let the orcs receive the ball. Now, let me set this up so you can understand. This is probably how it's gonna look when I do start playing. Oh shit, this is just a 2-minute game, so we need to the turn time here, you can see, is only 2 minutes, which means that the human team only has 2 minutes to set up how I want to have my players controlled when they kick the ball, since the orcs are going to be the first to move. There are some rules here. You can only have 2 people in the side here. This is called the something something that I can't remember right now, and 2 on the other side. But most importantly, you must have 3 players up here on the line of skirmish. Otherwise, you can't start. These guys here at the back are my these guys at the back here are my substitutes, and if anyone gets injured or if I want to switch another player in, I can use these. But since we don't really care at this point, I'm just going to accept. And now my orcs get to move about if they want to, which they kind of do. Now I'm not really keeping track of what player does what, since this is just to try and explain how the game works. But trust me, had this been an actual game against an actual human opponent, I would have cared more. So let's accept that as well. Alright, and now the humans, now they have to kick the ball. And they can kick it to any point on the opposing team's side of the pitch. However, the ball will scatter 1d6 squares, which means it can scatter anything from 1 square to 6 squares, and if it goes out of bounds,
and we're off.
Then the opposing team just gets to pick it up and well, give it to anyone. Now this guy has a certain skill that's called Kickoff return skill, and that means he gets to move 3 steps whenever the ball is kicked. After the ball is kicked, we roll on the kickoff table. The kickoff table is rolled on every time a ball is kicked at the beginning of the round, and stuff happens. Like this time, throw a rock happened, which is really unusual, and it's bad for one of the teams, because that means a fan came and threw a rock. And yeah, see, that human player is really hurt now, which isn't really good for the humans. Anyways, we finally in the actual Blood Bowl proper. What we want to do is move this ball over here all the way to this end over here. To do that, we need to have someone pick up the ball, like for example this guy, because he's good at it, and then we need to have someone carry it all the way over here. So let's start by clearing a path. Now this is a Black Orc blocker, and they have strength 4, as you can see right here. That means they're really strong. And this guy over here, he's only got strength 3. I'm sorry. See, only strength 3. That means that when I do try and punch him, like so, I get to roll 2 of these dice here. Had we had equal strength, it would only been 1. Whenever you block an opposing player, and block in this case means punch, or shove, or tackle, or whatever, you need to roll 1, 2, or 3 dice, depending on how strong you are. And the result of these dice can be the following. We have a skull, which is bad. That means you fall down. He punched you, even though you were stronger, better, whatever. You don't want a skull. It means you suffer a turnover, and the opposing player gets his next turn. Then, the skull and the pow, and that means both down. So that's not good. You still get knocked down and you suffer a turnover, but at least the other player gets knocked down as well. There is a way to counter this, and that's by having a skill called block, which means that if you roll both down, you are not affected. Well, that player you control isn't affected. Then you have the arrow, which just means defender pushed. You get to push him back 1 square. Then you have the big exploding square with a question mark, which means defender stumbles, and that is, well, you knock down the opposing player as long as he doesn't have the dodge skill, in which case the power with the question mark works exactly like an arrow. And then finally there's the big POW block, and the POW of course means you've knocked down the other player. And that's a good block. That is the one you want. And that's also why you want to roll 2 dice, which you do if you're stronger than the opposing player, because then you get to pick what result you get. So if you do roll the skull, hopefully you haven't rolled skulls on both of the dice, and then you can pick the least bad option. And that's how the block die works. And now that that has been explained, let's just pick Defender Stumbles, because our good pal the human doesn't have block. And I will follow up, because that means I'm a step closer, which is nice. And as you can see, the humans do have an ogre, which we talked about before, and he's really strong. So I'm going to try and punch him with my troll and see how that works. It might. And
they're
yes.
red hot. A majority of supporters reckon that the league should take measures to
don't
prevent
really want
the
to do
small
that.
minority of peaceful fans.
The troll has an
from watching a
ability
match
called
with
Really
terrorists.
Stupid, which means it's kind of hard to make him do stuff if he doesn't wanna.
And watch it on cable vision.
So I need to punch with my other Black Orc. Now my Black Orc has only got strength 4 and the ogre has strength 5. So I need to get some assists to get enough strength to beat him, because for every other player you have that stands next to the player you want to punch, you get 1 extra strength. So this guy right here, he's got strength 4, but these two good old chaps right here is standing next to the ogre, meaning he has effectively strength 6. So when I do punch him, I still get to roll 2 dice. Now, had the human players had more, had they had players standing next to these guys, that assist wouldn't have happened, because you need to stand by the guy you want to punch and not have any of the opposing team next to you. It's all very confusing, but hopefully it will become clear as I play on. And otherwise I'll probably have to explain it more. What I'm doing right now is I'm moving my players up further along, just so I can get closer to the end zone. And you're probably wondering what this green stuff means right here. Well, it's pretty simple really. It's a way for the game to show you how far you can run. Now, let's see. This Blitzer has a movement of 6, which is, as we talked about before, pretty average.
Said, and I quote,
and let's count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So everything in the green zone he can run to. No worries. Anything outside of that, like these 2 squares here, he can run to, but he needs to do a going for it roll, which means that for every step he takes, he needs to roll a d6 die, and if he rolls a 1, he falls down, and that is bad, because that means I suffer a turnover, and it's the human's turn. But just to try and show you how this looks, I'm going to run all the way down here, which is really dumb and shouldn't really be done at this part. So I should make it if I don't roll a 1, and I did not. I rolled a 3 and then I rolled a 5, so that's good. So we got him down there. So let's try and pass the ball to him, since we're almost out of time. And our thrower did pick up the ball, so he can run all the way here. We don't really want to risk him going for it anymore. And this circle here shows how far he can pass the ball, and also the numbers show how hard it is. The further you throw it, the harder it is. And I need to roll a 5 to make this, but since I'm a thrower, I get to try twice, and I failed both times. Which means I suffered a turnover. I fumbled a pass. I rolled a 1. That's bad. You shouldn't do that. But since we were rushing it and didn't really have any type of skill whatsoever, that's what happens. So now the humans have a chance to actually get the ball back, which they kind of want to do. So let's try and do that, shall we? First, we want to punch that thrower out of the way, because it's harder to actually pick up a ball when an opposing team's tackle zone is next to him. Tackle zones are these yellow borders here. If you're in a tackle zone and you want to move out of it, you need to make a dodge roll, and that's hard. And well, so you want to stay away from tackle zone, or if possible, like in this case, you want to remove tackle zones. Now, this is a blitzer, so he's gonna try and get over here. And then maybe he can punch this thrower, depending on if I remember. Let's not do it that way. Let's play it safe. Let's have this guy instead punch the thrower. This is what's called a blitz, and you can make one of these each turn. Each team can make one and only one. Otherwise, you can only punch people that you're standing next to at the start of the round. That means if you are a player that, if you're someone that doesn't want to get hit, you don't want to end up standing next to an opposing player because he's bound to punch you in the next round. So weak teams usually try and stay away from the other players at least one square, because that means they can't hurt you as often and as much. Now, I get to roll twice because my player has a skill here called Frenzy. And that means if I punch him once and I only push him back, then I get to punch him again. Which can be good and it can be bad, because had I punched him in such a way that he came next to players that give him assists, he might have ended up stronger than me. And then he'd have 2 dice and get to choose which one to pick, and that's not good. So you always want to make sure that if you have Frenzy, punch a guy that you can remain equally strong or at least as strong. Now, I fucking made it. I picked up the ball and everything nice and dandy. The orcs are really pissed. So just to show what a touchdown looks like, I'm gonna have the orcs end their turn and have my poor lineman who can't even reach the end zone run all the way down, end the turn again, and let's not have the orcs do anything because we want to see this animation, don't we? And then run down here into the end zone. Get me to the end zone. There we go. And the humans scored a touchdown in a game where they were actually kicking, which is bad form for the orcs, and they should be ashamed. And that is part of how you play Blood Bowl. There's a whole lot more to it, but let's face it, this has gone on for long enough. So hopefully by watching this you can actually keep up with what me and Ethan and our guests are saying, at least in some part, and bring your own input into the thread.